Hello again, everybody. Back with another Wachusett Chess Club A Championship game from 2019. This is a round 5 game between Roger Cappallo playing white and Bruce Felton playing black. It was a pretty wide open game for a while. It was Smith-Morra Gambit accepted. I played Bruce a couple times like this, and he's game to play along and mix it up. So it's kind of a fun game here. Uh, as always, I'm interested in seeing a couple of key points, what the engine thought of it after I had written a review about the game. Uh, One interesting thing to note right off the bat is uh, this D6 E5 pawn structures, one of um, the Najdorf Sicilian pawn structures, and I think Black got pretty much all he could ask for so far, and well, 11 moves into it. Reasonably thematic moves, I'd say. That was the first time that I wondered about a move because it takes a pretty nice defender away from the king side, but it makes space for the rook to go to c8 and try to maybe liquidate the last of the rooks and see about playing with this kind of congested pawn structure with the minor pieces. Um, but this is about where I thought the game got sort of interesting. Roger starts playing uh, on the king side, and one of the moves that was uh, it seemed a little bit desperate, but it was I thought it was a pretty good move. It turns out the engine didn't think much of it. Was this bishop e8 to protect the f7 square? So that gives black three defenders on that square for white's three attackers, but white has other targets as well. So it got what looked like a bit dicey here uh, for a bit, and Roger backed off after provoking the small uh, concession by Bruce by playing h6. Uh, we're headed for move 27, I think. Yeah. So I think this g6 was curious because that gives this h-pawn, which had already gotten uh, pushed from h3, a chance to go to h5, and it has a hook now. It could be a little risky, considering it would half open the file for that rook, and the king is not far behind, so white would have to be fairly cautious about it, but at least it gives something to grab onto. Um, and so Roger did, and g5 I wondered about. Um, for one reason, I wondered if it was a good time, turn on the engine, if f5 was reasonable because, maybe not. The my idea was that if this pawn takes, which is what the engine says, then black takes back, but now his defenders have a little bit more room to get themselves over here to the king side and maybe shore up the defense. But well, Stockfish isn't all that impressed. And best move, still a couple of pawn advantage, so that didn't pan out. But let's go back to g5. What did that? Yeah, so like a pawn and a half difference. So yeah, not worth it. All right, that's the point of the video. See what kind of work, how to check my work. Um, Feels like Roger's like right on the cusp, but um, when this queen went to b8 and now is back on d8, it and the bishop make a nice battery to reinforce this g5 square because white has 3 pieces on it. I wonder if, maybe there's a way to back the bishop out, back the knight out, get the rook over there and bring another, and then put the knight back on f3, get another piece on it. Meanwhile, maybe this rook comes over and maybe the knight can hop around. There's a lot of options. So here's another spot. I guess the idea would be this knight wants to get to g4 and maybe undermine the pawn chain. But again, with this battery, it's awfully hard to get on g5. I wonder if that rook can come over. So, white's very close to not having any squares for the queen. It's leading the way on this attack, but this pawn structure is for Bruce has gained a lot of space, kept white's pieces from being able to reach in to coordinate, other than just little 1 or 2 move sorties, which partly caused some of these adjustments in the pawn structure. But even so, it's keeping white at bay. Yeah, finally, f5 is probably good, I guess. Let's see what happens here. So basically an even game. So let's see, we still have, let's count. White gambited the pawn, so we have 6 pawns and 6 pawns, but again, black recovers the f5 pawn, so black has the gambited pawn that white gave up in the opening, and a fairly solid position. And like before, some room for these pieces to, a lot of squares available to these pieces to move around, help the king, as opposed to being blocked by their own pawns. So right here, I mean, it seems like black has a pretty reasonable game. One other thing that was fairly interesting, well, I think there were a couple moves that were not optimal, including g4, because I think it's a free pawn. Now, when I looked at this with the engine, yeah, there you go. With Lichess's curve of, the plus and minus scores plotted as a curve, it was sloppier than I had thought. I thought this was probably the important point of the game, where that pawn is free. The h5 pawn is available. This knight's a little out of play, but it does help defend the king side. And if you take it off, then the queen comes in and you have a bit of trouble as white. So Roger retreats with the queen with the idea that if he can get to g6, he has a perpetual worst case. So this this rook can be taken, but I'm pretty sure if we did this, we would see that it's a dead draw. Yeah, back and forth. And then the other line is also a dead draw, where knight takes. Maybe there's a little more to this one if black had messed up a little, because now you have another piece in play that maybe can coordinate with the queen. But now the engine says 0, so I'll take the word for it. The last thing to talk about in this game I thought was fairly special was 2 things, really. I'm just going to play through all the moves and note that it looks like this knight in the corner on a8 is going to be trapped. Like the bishops have to dominate it. But I realized that if I look closer, then there's unlikely that Roger would have gone for this variation to go down a full piece. So he can get out. The knight can get out. And then the problem is if you just watch the kings, I'm just going to scan ahead fast. If you watch the kings, you can see how black's king goes all the way around, and eventually white's king is overloaded, and it's going to cost Roger a piece, and he's got the only piece and plenty of pressure. The f2 pawn goes soon, and then that's that. But the key, I thought, was this. Let me see if I can find it. King c4. Yeah. King c4 makes contact with the b5 square. So just because this bishop isn't covering it doesn't mean it's available to white for a push. But also after that, Bruce didn't play king d3, which would have made that square available to a push, right? If he plays this, maybe you can play that, and then you might be able to sneak by. I wonder what this says. Nope, still good for black. All right, living and learning today. But anyway, then the point is, not only did he not go to d3, he also didn't go on to c3 and cause any kind of checks or tactics because Roger has a dark square bishop. All right, so that's that. It was a pretty entertaining game, I thought. It seemed kind of tied up, and next thing you know, it explodes, and Bruce got all the play. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Back again with another round.